Thank you very much, Kerry. So, Nicholas, could you please share my presentation? Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. The subject of my today's presentation, as Kari said, is basically a summary of the work that we have done with NAADSN, with Dr. Whitney Lockenbauer, as well as other experts specializing on Russia's Arctic region. And today's presentation is basically a summary of what we have done in the past couple of months. So I decided to name this presentation as Russia's posture in the Arctic in the era of major geopolitical changes and growing instability. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Excellent. And for the agenda, I decided to break the meeting onto four main parts. So first, I will very briefly discuss and describe the main agendas, the most important, the focal points, explaining why Russia is strategically interested in the Arctic region and what is the strategic meaning, what is the essential meaning of the Arctic region for the Russian Federation. And then three main pillars, three main elements of today's presentation. So first, I will talk about the security aspect of Russia's policies in the Arctic region since 2022, since the outbreak of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. The second important topic that I will entertain in this presentation is related to the institutional aspect of developments and cooperation in the Arctic region. And mainly, of course, I will concentrate on the activities of the Arctic Council, which is perhaps one of the most successful examples of collaboration between the Russian Federation and its Western partners since 1991 in the Arctic macro region. And finally, in the final analysis, I will talk about the informational aspect, which, as we've seen, through the lens of Russia's foreign and security policy, plays a very important instrumental role for Russia. And more specifically, I will talk about the main themes and the main ideas, the main narratives entertained by Russian media, by Russian propaganda, by Russian top-rank officials when it comes to the Arctic region and the most recent post-2022 developments in the Arctic region. So could we go to the next slide, please? Sorry. So now, very, very briefly, I will summarize strategic importance of the Arctic region for the Russian Federation. And I decided to break it up onto several essential factors that, in my view, explain and define Russia's strategic interest in the Arctic region, which again goes well beyond economic or even sometimes political calculations. But I will start with the geo-economic compound. So in my view, in my opinion, four main factors characterize Russia's strategic interest in the Arctic region from this economic or geo-economic point of view. So the first important element is that prior to the outbreak of Russia's war of choice against Ukraine, it was the Arctic region that attracted the most of foreign direct investments coming to the Russian Federation. So from this point of view, through this lens, the Arctic region plays a very important role. So it's not just a source of cash, but also an element that was visible through the transfer of know-how, of new technologies, and things like this. So in this regard, FDI plays, and it goes well beyond mere economics or just business interests. The second important thing is that the Arctic region, or rather revenue that the Russian budget was receiving, because today, as you know, those of you who follow Russia closely, we know that the Russian side has basically classified all major trade transactions. So today it's only bits and pieces of information that are available to us. But before the outbreak of war, Russia's GDP approximately consisted of 12% of the resources and commodities that were sent, that were sold through and from the Arctic region. The third important aspect is, I think it's well known, it's the vast natural resources that are contained in the Russia's Arctic region and the high north. So it goes well beyond oil or natural gas or liquefied natural gas. It's definitely the biomarine resources. That is definitely the rare earth minerals, gold, diamonds. So multiplicity, great variety of different types of natural resources that used to attract both foreign and domestic businesses. And the fourth strategic aspect that I think needs to be, absolutely must be mentioned in this geo-economic factor is the aspect related to transportation. And here I am not only referring to the Northern Sea route, which is an artery, a transportation artery that has been promoted by Russia for the past couple of years. Well, in fact, the history goes back to the pre-1917 period, but acute interest and visible interest of the Russian side with regards to the Northern Sea route goes back to the Putin's period, but also to the land type transfer, land-based transportation routes, including the so-called Belkomor project, which in my view and in the view of many experts, is an indispensable element to the Northern Sea route, because without land transportation, without land routes, the Northern Sea route in many ways will not, probably is not going to serve its main purpose. So the main justification in terms of geo-economic aspect for the Russian side is the understanding and the perception of the Arctic region. And that idea, by the way, circulated in Russia's policy as well as academic community well before the outbreak of war, is that the Arctic region should serve as a locomotive of economic development for the Russian Federation for the next couple of decades, not just years, but decades. And this, I think, is quite crucial, quite important. Could we go to this next slide, please? The second important factor is the element of geopolitics and security. So here I would like to define, articulate three very important aspects. So the first one is before the outbreak of war in 2022 and then its continuation in 2023 and collapse and crumbling some of the myths about the Russian war machine and Russian military capabilities, the majority of Western experts considered Russia's military dominance and paramilitary dominance in the Arctic region to be almost unchallenged. So at that time, that was perhaps one of very few theaters where the Russian side, again, in military terms, enjoyed almost unchallenged dominance and superiority. Again, that was seen on paper, that was seen in Russia's official reports, but that was also one of the main factors of concern for the mainly Western experts and policymakers. So the second important thing is that the Russian side managed to restore and recreate, some of them from scratch, some military and defense objects as well as military infrastructure, which, in my view, at least for now, is the most advanced, the most developed in comparison with any other Arctic nation, any other Arctic country. Again, the foundation for that was, of course, created during the Soviet time. So what Russia did was a partial remilitarization of the area and inclusion of certain new types of military facilities. And the third major aspect here was and is the reportedly strongest military technical capabilities that the Russian side managed to accumulate, build up in the Arctic region. Again, the key word here is reportedly, because prior to the outbreak of war, again, I wrote several reports on Russia's remilitarization of the Arctic, and the Russian side took pride in being able to deploy some of the most, as they discussed this, as they described them, the most modern, the most advanced types of technical and military support, including the Arctic Panzer, Buk systems that were specifically designed for the conditions of the Arctic region, modernized main battle tanks. But again, what we saw in Ukraine, in many ways, I wouldn't say completely destroyed, but diminished. At least diminished the perception of seriousness and superiority of Russia's military potential. That's why today Russia, according to the most recent report, Russia is trailing France in terms of selling its weaponry and arms. So I think in many ways this is also stipulated by the course and development of the war in Ukraine. And basically what the main meaning of this factor, in my view, is that the perception of the Arctic region as Russia's main true sphere of influence, it really permeated, it really dominated Western discourse, Western analysis. So in many ways, the geopolitical security factor were viewed as one of the most essential pillars of Russia's military dominance in this macro region. Could we go to the next slide, please? Yes, so factor number 3, which I call intangible aspect, which again is quite interesting. What do I mean? What do I attribute? What do I define as intangible aspect? So the first element is, again, those of you who were watching Russia closely before the outbreak of war in Ukraine in 2022, or even before its illegal annexation of Crimea, you must have noticed that the status or the idea, in a way, obsession with a superpower status and the forfeiture of the superpower status after the collapse of the Soviet Union was really taking hold, was starting to dominate Russia's internal as well as external messages. So Russia, in many ways, again, could still be viewed as the Arctic superpower. And what is important on top of that, what is the most interesting, what is the most important, is that this element super mainly applies basically only to 2 elements. It's stockpile of nuclear weapons and the Arctic region. So from moral psychological point of view, the fact that Russia is still a dominating actor in the Arctic, this is a very important element for the Russian propaganda and for Russia's prestige seeking as well as its ambitions. The second important thing here is that unlike some other theaters, such as, for instance, Central Asia, which is called Russia's soft underbelly, as well as parts of the Caucasus region, the Arctic region could be viewed as Russia's safe underbelly. In fact, again, based on Russia's conventional military superiority in the Arctic, as well as the fact that not a single actor, not a single country has ever entertained in earnest, an idea of a military conflict or military operations against Russia in this macro region. Obviously, it gave Russian military political elites a sense of safety and stability in the Arctic region, something that they did not want to change, at least in a certain way. And the third idea was something that I found in the writings of Russian conservative intellectuals, ultra-conservative intellectuals, when they talk about Russia's position and positions in the Arctic and the need to expand the zone of control in the Arctic. So when I'm saying conservative or ultra-conservative thinkers, it's Dugin, it's basically many representatives of the Isborgsk Club. I wrote an article about the Isborgsk Club for NAADSN. And in many of these works, one interesting idea frequently circulates about Russia being the only Nordic nation, for instance, in criticism or, in pinpointing, underscoring this thesis. Russian conservative experts are saying that, for instance, in North America, the majority of people tend to live in the southern parts of the United States, in the middle of the United States. And as they say, again, in their narrative, not many people prefer to live in either Canada or even up north. In Russia, they are saying it is completely different. That is why in absolute numbers, the population of the Arctic region and high north in Russia is much higher than in any other country, in any other actor in the Arctic region. Could we go to the next slide, please? So in general, the main message that Russia is trying to postulate, it is trying to get across is and was mainly was the issue, the idea of Russia being the only sustainable, the only responsible Arctic player who basically complies with all the three main elements of the so-called, it comes from business, of the triple bottom line. The planet, so Russia is positioning itself as the only actor that truly cares and truly invests a lot of time, financial means, energy in maintaining the Arctic region's brachial ecosystem. Also, from the people point of view, from the social perspective, Russia is also trying to get across a message that, given the fact that Russia has the largest number of indigenous and a small number of peoples living in the high north in the Arctic region, this is a corroboration that Russia is the only actor that truly cares and promotes local cultures, local languages, empowers the local population. And from the financial point of view, Russia is also trying to kind of spread a message that the only country that has on whose territory we have major financial, major infrastructural, major oil, gas, coal, other project is the Russian Federation, and both the people who live there greatly benefit from it, and the planet or the environment, local environment, is also, all the issues are addressed equally. So that's the main message. And today, while explaining certain things, I will try to challenge some of Russia's narratives that it has formulated and has aired about the Arctic region. Could we go to the next slide, please? So let me begin with the first element, as I identified in the agenda, the security aspect of the Arctic region in the post-2022 interim. And here are two main readings that I would really suggest. One of them is the article that was co-written by myself, Professor Lackenbauer, and Professor Laginus, Russian reactions to NATO's Nordic expansion. The article was published in July 2023, and it's available on NAADSN website. And also the second project, the second reading, which is upcoming today, we are working on a book chapter about the Arctic region, and there we will try to develop these ideas and these narratives in a greater detail. Could we go to the next slide, please? So here, I know it's a lot of information here. So here is a table that basically discusses two sides, two aspects associated with defense and security aspect of the Russian Russia's policy, which provides two perspectives. So in column one, plans and declarations, I've summarized some of the most interesting, some of the most important, I would say, messages and ideas generated by Russia's military political leadership with respect to the Arctic region and the trajectory that the Arctic region should be developing along in the next couple of years, especially after the Nordic enlargement of NATO in 2023. And well, yes. So plans and declarations. So here we have, and I won't read all of them because it will take a lot of time. So just a summary. So certain ideas in terms of upgrading and changing, increasing capabilities in the domain of communication, transportation, information and intelligence gathering, as well as its point number 4, ideas about beefing up and increasing the manpower potential. So here we see the transformation, what is being proposed today to increase both the defensive and offensive potential of the Kola Peninsula and Murmansk Oblast specifically. So the main message, something that we can summarize, something that we can choose from these plans / declarations is the idea and the narrative, the type of narrative that Russia will be able to find an adequate and proportionate response to NATO's, as they call it, expansion, while being able to maintain and keep Russia's military superiority in the area for the next couple of years, irrespectively of the war in Ukraine and Russia's mounting losses in this war. And here on the right side of the column, here we see the actual action, something that has really transpired in the Arctic region starting from 2022. And as you can see, basically the difference between plans, declarations, and rhetoric and what really happened before 2022, it is quite visible. So the gap is visible. So what we see, in fact, is, and I analyzed multiple sources in the Russian language, multiple articles about what has been happening in the Arctic region since 2022. And what I found really is that in its military training, in its actions in the domain of defense and security, Russia is primarily concentrating its effort on training and rehearsing some defensive operations along the Northern Sea route and the coastal area. So as for now, at least what is on the surface, what we can see, what is being reported, is that Russia has not really demonstrated much of an offensive potential, or at least plans to expand its offensive potential. And I'm talking about the actions part, not rhetoric or plans part. Rather, it is primarily concentrating its effort on training, on rehearsing potential defensive operations, again, to defend the Northern Sea route, as well as to defend coastal area and the most brittle, the weakest chains, the weakest spots in the Arctic region. Could we go to the next slide, please? In the second part, I'll talk about informational aspect and the post-2022 developments. And here again, two suggested readings, two readings that I recommend. The first one is another article co-written by myself, Professor Lackenbauer, and Adam Laginus, Russian Reactions to NATO's, what they call Nordic Expansion 2023. And also a NAADSN book project that will also delve deeper in this area, in this issue, and surrounded themes. Could we go to the next slide, please? So in terms of Russia's key narratives and the main features associated with the narrative, I can really think about several key themes, several key topics. One of them is attributed to the fact, again, in Russian rhetoric, in Russian connotation, is that negative trends in the Arctic is basically West's fault and what Russian sources call overreaction on, again, quote unquote, events in Ukraine. So, of course, in Russia, it's legally prohibited to say war, only special military operations, or they also refer to the catastrophe, the calamity that is taking part in Ukraine as just events. So this, of course, is happening, Russia is convincingly forgetting its own multiple violations of international law since early 1990s till present day. And again, Russia attributes to all negative factors to the reduction of collaboration and general cooperation in the Arctic region, to this development, to West's lack of desire to understand Russia's security concerns and its security needs. The second important feature, the second important narrative that is visible in Russian media domain is that Russia is compelled to respond. So I think that this narrative is not really new. Russia has been using this narrative for many years, and the Soviet Union, same thing, by the way. So here we see the continuation of the same narrative. And what Russia is saying is that every step or every single step related to Russia's need to militarize or remilitarize the Arctic region, to beef up its military potential in the Arctic region, is nothing but it's justified as a need to respond to Western aggressive stance on Russia. Of course, again, Russia is forgetting that, or Russian officials are forgetting, convincingly forgetting to say that the actual remilitarization, of the Arctic region was launched back in 2012. Or again, if we are to be more scrupulous with the facts, then certain elements could be addressed, could be traced back to 1999 and first Zapad exercises that also was in a way related to the Arctic region. And the third important thing, the third important narrative that is being promulgated by the Russian propaganda is that if the West continues to ignore Russia, then it is the West who will pay the price for severing ties with Russia in such issues as climate change or collaboration, communication between indigenous population. What is particularly interesting here, what is, I would say, a bit amusing here, is that in fact, Russia is #1 polluter of the Arctic region. In one of my reports, I wrote a series of reports on this for both the Jamestown Foundation in DC and for NAADSN. Every year, there are about several hundred reported, or even thousands, because Russia's Greenpeace, that was recognized as a foreign agent and then closed down basically in Russia, they report up to several thousands accidents per year that involve oil, natural gas, and other facilities. So basically, Russia is again forgetting in its narrative, is forgetting about that fact. And even more interesting, even more amusing is the fact that Russia is mentioning indigenous and small numbered people, and it's concerned about these people because, as I will explain in the next section, section, in fact, Russia is one of the main violators of the social pillar of the triple bottom line and social sustainability in the Arctic region. Could we go to the next slide, please? And now the final stage, the final element of my presentation here is the institutional aspect, and again, the developments after Russia's full-scale aggression against Ukraine. And here we have two main readings that I suggest, written by Professor Whitney Lockenbauer, my colleague also Evgenia Sidorova, and myself. Right on Russia's indigenous peoples and the war in Ukraine, pro-Kremlin narratives and voices of dissent, written and published in July 2023. And another piece co-written with Professor Whitney Lockenbauer, The Future of the Arctic Council, Russian Perspective Since February 2022, which was published on NAADSN webpage in August 2023. Could we go to the next slide, please? So here we have several important themes here. The first one is the activities of the Arctic Council. If you scan, if you analyze the major citations, major works that have been published, that have appeared in Russia's informational space with regards to the Arctic Council after 2022, perhaps the key word that you will find is the word illegitimacy. So Russia is saying that activities, well, first of all, that de facto exclusion, at least temporary exclusion of the Russian Federation from the work of the Arctic Council is illegitimate because here they are referring to the culture of consensus. that has been the dominating spirit of the Arctic Council from its inception in 1996. And then also another topic, another aspect that Russia is relying on, another kind of narrative that Russia is relying on, is that all decisions that have been made by the Arctic Council after Russia's suspension from its work are also illegitimate, because without Russia, as the Russian side is saying, without the main Arctic player, it is illegitimate, or all decisions are illegitimate. What is the main debate? What are two main narratives that today could be found in Russia's informational space? So the first one is there is a very serious debate about the Arctic Council as such. Certain group of experts, and this is the minority for now, are proposing or saying that Russia should leave, should abandon the Arctic Council, not to follow the lead of those who basically excluded it, Russia, I mean, from the Arctic Council. Others are saying that as a response, Russia should form parallel structures structures that will largely replace the Arctic Council. Some, and this is for now, this is the majority, are saying that Russia should leave things as they are and maybe wait for the resolution of the war in Ukraine and to start to begin from there. So the second important debate is related to the role of so-called non-Arctic nations. And when I'm saying non-Arctic nations, of course, I mean China, because this is the only non-Arctic nation that has been consistently demonstrating its strategic interest and determination to expand its role and its presence in the Arctic region. In fact, if we think about the Belt and Road Initiative, today we will see that the Arctic region is set to play strategic role as a polar aspect of the Belt and Road Initiative. So we are referring to China. And what is interesting is that what I noticed is that Russia's expert community is really seriously concerned about that. So on the surface, we see that there is lots of bravado from the side of the Russian experts saying that we don't need the West, it's them who need us. We are fine by working or switching our attention to non-Arctic nations and China in particular. But what we see is that there are some voices that express very, very cautious concern about including China, or rather switching to China instead of the West, because everyone clearly understands that today, neither from demographic, nor from military, nor from especially economic perspective, Russia is no match to China. And many experts, some experts at least, are seriously concerned about inclusion or greater inclusion of China. And I think the best example here was the article by Surkov, who was one of the architects really of the power vertical, a person who was and maybe still is very close to Putin. He wrote an article saying that Russia should avoid a scenario under which China would get better or more presence or more foothold in the Arctic, because then this will pose a range of strategical challenges for Russia itself, potentially for its statehood, for its resources. So again, the voices of discontent, the voices of dissent are already there, and that's quite an interesting thing. Even though Vladimir Putin himself, just after the outbreak of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, sort of invited foreign or either how they call them friendly nations to start their work, to increase their activities in the Arctic. Again, many other experts, many other influential experts are concerned with this prospect. Could we go to the next slide, please? And the second important narrative, the second important agenda is the well-being and the future of the indigenous and small-numbered people in the circumpolar region. So Russia's main precondition, Russia's main idea is that RIPON must remain the main body that represents the voices of Russia's indigenous and small-numbered people, and that again, and I'm reiterating the previous point, that Russia is one of, if not the most socially sustainable actor in the Arctic region that truly cares about the well-being and about the lives, about economic conditions, literacy rates, as well as general living standards of indigenous and small-numbered people. And the main idea by Russia is that, again, if the West decides to cut down ties with Russia on questions related to indigenous and small-numbered peoples, it is the West who will suffer greatly because of the expertise that Russia has, because of the overall number of people who live, indigenous and small-numbered peoples who live in this in Russia's Arctic zone. The main problems, however, I see in two main dimensions. The first one is the organization of RIPON itself. We do have multiple evidences that the political leadership of RIPON is directly subordinated to the Russian state, and more specifically to Russia's security and intelligence services. And the only reason why they need not just one, but what they need representation in international forums is to get intelligence, to get information about the developments to the Russian state. And this thesis was, by the way, articulated by a prominent and outstanding Russian expert, indigenous Russian expert, Pavel Selezaga, who said that current representatives of RIPON, they do much more harm to the local population, indigenous population, than good. And also in the article that I already mentioned before, we tracked the position of RIPON leadership on the war in Ukraine, and what we can see is that the leadership of RIPON is developing, is spreading the pro-war propaganda. They're not trying to do anything to mitigate the war or the conclusions or the impact on the small-numbered and indigenous peoples. So the leadership of RIPON and the RIPON as an organization itself now is, of course, a spoiler that should be dealt with separately. And the second thing that challenges and defeats the whole Russia's argument about the care about indigenous and small-numbered peoples is that Russia is de facto conducting a policy of genocide toward indigenous and small-numbered people who populate the Arctic region and the high north. If you could go to the next slide, please. So based on my investigations and based on available information, here is a very interesting image that gives us a better perception of what is truly happening there. Here we have top 15 regions by number of deceased soldiers per 100,000 population compared to Moscow. And what we see here is that the highest losses among Russian soldiers are suffered by ethnic Tuvians, Buryats, Nenets, people coming from Magadan Oblast, Chukotka, Zabaikale Krai, Sakhalin Oblast, Altai, and then the Caucasus. And it's Moscow that occupies the lowest position. So, based on investigative reports by Radio Liberty Free Europe, multiple other evidences, we can definitely say, we can see that the Russian side is deliberately, purposefully utilizing and basically disposing of ethnic, indigenous and ethnically non-Russian peoples in Ukraine. And again, this is corroborated by exceptionally high numbers of killed soldiers representing the Arctic region, high north, and parts of Siberia and the Far East. On this, thank you.